Hello, and episode 148. Today I am going to be talking about the most dangerous cinematic psychopath of all time. No, not Jason Voorhees, not Freddy Krueger, not even Citizen Kane. I'm going to be talking about James Bond. I'm going to do a ranking through the 25 official James Bond films and one unofficial James Bond film. So we're going to go through 26 James Bond films. I'm going to go in reverse order because that seems to be more fun. Number one will leave you shook, or you can just go to about 44 minutes into this and you go, thought it was going to be that one. I haven't done one of these for a week. As I've said before, I only ever do them when I want to and when I have the energy and the impetus to do so. And I've got a fairly compulsive personality. I focus on things, sometimes to the exception of all other things. And right now I saw the most recent James Bond film, No Time to Die, and I'm going to include No Time to Die in my rankings. So you are no doubt on tenterhooks, I think is the technical phrase. No, I don't think you care that much, but you're quite interested to know what I think the worst James Bond film is. This will surprise many of you. The worst James Bond film, 2015's Spectre. I hate this film. It is narratively utter, complete garbage. It's nonsensical, idiotic. It destroys everything about James Bond that is good and replaces it with daddy issues, Bond bingo, improbable coincidences, even improbable by the James Bond franchise, by the way. And throws in a few token explosions to make it all make sense. This is a film that didn't need to be made, telling a story that didn't need to be told, and a story that if someone had posited it to you as fan fiction, you would go, that is fucking bullshit, because it is. The contents of this film, the plot of this film, the improbable fact that Blofeld is somehow James Bond's kind of stepbrother in an adopted skiing environment is just such utter and complete hokum nonsense bullshit and improbable. It's just fucking terrible. Spectre. It is awful. They're trying to build some kind of meaningful mythology into a series that doesn't need or require a meaningful mythology. When you think about what James Bond films are, I did an episode a few weeks ago where I talked about the James Bond formula. And I talked about how, it's a combination of a megalomaniac, an improbable but not impossible plot to take over the world, some bizarre motivation, and is at least vaguely grounded in reality. And instead, what we get is some kind of weird J.G. Ballard version of James Bond with some kind of bizarre hidden family tragedy that frankly wouldn't be out of place in a Wes Anderson movie with explosions. Spectre, fucking shit. There you are. That's my rundown to it. Skyfall is my next James Bond film, number 25 on the ranking. Not quite as bad as Spectre, still pretty damn terrible, to be honest. It does feel a lot like they've got a checklist on a piece of paper of what they need to have in a James Bond film. And right, okay, so we need glamorous locations. Well, London, why not? We need a train, an explosion, a weird bad guy. Yes, let's get his Aston Martin back from 60 years ago. Irrespective of the fact that Daniel Craig is clearly not 89 years old in this, yet somehow has the memories and an original working Aston Martin from the 60s. The plot of this film is again incoherent to the point of insulting. If I had put the plots of Skyfall or Spectre and submitted them into a creative writing course, I would be excoriated to the extent that the patient would have died on the table. Skyfall is a really, really bad James Bond film. Obviously not as bad as Spectre, but still pretty damn terrible, to be honest. And that's where I'm going to leave it, I think. I can talk in more detail about these. I have reviews that I've written for a number of the James Bond films when they came out. I was not a fan of Skyfall. I thought it couldn't get worse than Skyfall. And then they served up the plate of polished turdery that was Spectre. So we go to number 24 on the list. Die Another Day. Here is one of the many, many posters for Die Another Day that there is. This was a film that when I saw it at the cinema in 2002, I saw it and I actually apologised to my girlfriend. I went, look, that was so bad. I owe you 3 chick flicks for this movie. And she took me up on those 3 chick flicks, and I deserved it. Die Another Day is awful. It's got a bad guy with diamonds encrusted in his face. It's got an invisible car. It's got a space laser. It's got this terrible Halle Berry kind of spin-off character that they were talking about potentially doing spin-offs and it being exciting. It's so bad it almost killed the franchise. Obviously, it's the last film which Pierce Brosnan made. It's the kind of film that is so bad that had it not been James Bond, had it been the 4th James Bond movie, for example, like, Batman and Robin, it would have probably killed the franchise there and then and left it dead on the table. Die Another Day is awful. There's Halle Berry. Oh, look, it's an intriguing reversal of the Bond coming out of the water scene in Casino Royale, but also an echo of the Ursula Andress coming out of the water in Doctor No. Here's a bit, and there's your invisible fucking car, the Aston Martin Vanquish, also known as the Vanish. A terrible car for a terrible movie, where you have got invisible cars, you've got bad guys that don't sleep, you've got an undercurrent of casual Koreanophobia in there, and you've got a bad guy with diamonds for a face. Die Another Day should be called Dog Shit Another Day. Of course, there are equally bad films from earlier on in the careers of the respective Bonds. Number 23, 1983's Octopusy. To quote Martin Amis's essay around pornography, he said that pussy was bullshit, so he called this Octobullshit. It's the worst of the Roger Moore movies. It's also heavily in debt to Indiana Jones films. So you think about the Indiana Jones film and Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981. That came out because Steven Spielberg wanted to make James Bond films, but he couldn't make James Bond films, so he invented his own James Bond, Indiana Jones. And obviously Tom Cruise has got his own James Bond in the shape of Mission Impossible. Octopussy is a lasagna of plot elements, a pick and mix. It's got a bizarre and unusual kind of subplot with a crazed Russian general that wants to start World War III because the West is decadent, imperialistic scum. It's got an awful kind of thing about smuggling, was it Fabergé eggs or something? I don't even know what those things are. It's got a lot of stuff that's set in India, which is, in itself not an issue, apart from the fact that I think it's handled quite terribly. And it's just Octopussy, apart from the pre-credit sequence, which is fantastic, the rest of Octopussy is really very bad indeed. There's, for example, James Bond in a automated crocodile submarine. What were they thinking? And there's Maud Adams as one of the bad ladies, doing whatever bad ladies do, because James Bond is full of bad ladies. Now, what you'll probably start to notice, actually, is a lot of the bad films are the last films in the series which were made by the respective James Bonds, which means that number 22 can only be Diamonds Are Forever, which has not aged well. Diamonds Are Forever is not my favourite Bond at all by a very long shot, although it's obviously got Q in it, and it's got Sean Connery. And I mean, look at those hairstyles, very, very 70s there. But Diamonds Are Forever is not a great film at all. It's got this really uncomfortable kind of subplot about some of the bad guy contract killers being lovers. It's got some pretty broad characters which fully lean into the yee-haw kind of cliches. It's got a fascinating subplot about faking the moon landings, but it's really only an excuse to drive a moon buggy in the desert of Vegas. And really, you can see that throughout the whole film, Sean Connery has clearly just got his eyes on a paycheck, $1 million, well, £1 million, I believe, for Diamonds Are Forever. It's a bad film. It's unimaginative. It's like someone's said to Sean Connery, "Do you want to be in a pastiche of a James Bond film, but it's actually a James Bond film?" And he was like, "Well, where's the check?" And bearing in mind that for this, he was paid $1 million. For Highlander 2, I think he was paid $3.5 million, which just goes to show that he would make any old shit if you paid him. And then the next one, which I don't like, again, I think number 21, Thunderball. The song by Tom Jones is absolutely great. This is a really strange film. It's got bizarre and pedestrian plots and action sequences. It's got an action scene where the music starts halfway through, presumably because they didn't have enough time to do it. So you've got like 2 minutes of relatively silent underwater punching, where the only sound is and then you've got music suddenly and to kind of like input tension where it doesn't necessarily need to be in the film. Thunderball is thoroughly forgettable. There is a bad guy keeping up the trope of all the James Bond bad guys that have some form of facial disfigurements, which is, of course, in No Time to Die, in that terrible Die Another Day, You Only Live Twice, Thunderball, all of those, and you kind of go, well, what's the point? There's James Bond on a rocket pack, because rocket packs are exciting. There's a Bond girl, and there's a poster for, I think, yeah, probably Thunderball, because it's got boats on it. There you are. Thunderball, again, not a great Bond movie, I'm afraid to say. I wish it was. So number 20 is where it all began. Dr. No, Bond before it was Bond. And it's very primitive, embryonic, starting the franchise without really knowing exactly what you were doing. So the plots weren't settled, the pre-credit sequence weren't settled, the music wasn't settled, the ideas behind it weren't really grounded out, how it was going to be presented. It was all kind of, you're just watching them learning how to be James Bond. And Dr. No is both, has aged terribly. It's got some borderline racism in it, from the way that some of the characters talk to each other. But it's also just very, very unformed. It's by no means a good James Bond movie. Certainly not the best. If it was the only James Bond film, it would be like fantastic, and no doubt Alfred Hitchcock would have stolen huge amounts from it for some kind of spy caper. But it's not. That's not the case. Number 19, The World Is Not Enough Is Not Enough. Here's a terrible movie. It really is quite bad indeed. They think they're being daring. And if I remember rightly, The World Is Not Enough has a fantastic cameo by Vincent Schiavelli, who says, "I could shoot you from Stuttgart and not miss." It's fantastic. He's only in the film for like 2 minutes, but he's easily the best thing about it. The rest of this film is absolute bollocks, I'm afraid to say. I mean, look, there you go. You've got Begbie, your Raj Nutter from Trainspotting, as a bad guy who, because of a slowly moving bullet that's going through his brain, can't feel pain. You really get the feeling, and what crazy fucked up affliction can we give a bad guy? So there it is. They're all damaged or broken in some way that don't make any sense. And there's the real bad guy of the film. Well, actually, the real bad guys of this particular film are the Broccolis, because they made this film, but they had no story to tell with this one. It's not particularly good. All right, number 18, I believe, is Never Say Never Again, an unofficial James Bond film featuring things that were owned under the copyright of the co-writer of the Thunderball movie, Kevin McClory. Sean Connery tempted back into the role. Irving Kershner, fresh off the heels of The Empire Strikes Back and The Eyes of Laura Mars in the director's seat. No chance of using the James Bond kind of gun barrel sequence, the 007 theme. The characters had names like Quartermaster and was it Master and all that kind of stuff, and M was called Montgomery, I think, and they're all played by actors that, if you really squinted, kind of looked like they belonged in the James Bond franchise. Basically, if Oldie make James Bond movies, it's Never Say Never Again, where you go from eating Monster Munch to the considerably cheaper one, which is called Monster Claws and is in exactly the same shade of purple, but is 9% different, just enough as to not breach copyright laws. Never Say Never Again, Never again. God, I hope I haven't broken it, because that Blu-ray is quite expensive now. Right, 18, For Your Eyes Only. The 1981 gritty reboot stroke remake of that's designed to make Bond a little bit more grounded after the film before it, which was when James Bond went to space. For Your Eyes Only is absolutely functional. It's by no means amazing. It's certainly not the best James Bond film. It's got some interesting ideas in it. Yeah, it's got a good Cold War plot. It's got a fascinating resolution where nobody actually wins. But it was clearly designed as a reboot for Bond after Moonraker, because I think Roger Moore had said, "Oh, I'm not going to do any James Bond films after Moonraker," so that they had For Your Eyes Only opened with one of the best pre-credit sequences with a remote control helicopter and James Bond visiting the grave of his wife who died in on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I know that's a spoiler, but that film came out 53 years ago, so it's okay. It's enough time now. I quite like For Your Eyes Only. I particularly like Topol in it. He does a really good job, actually, of playing one of the characters, because the character's always eating pistachio nuts. Now, that may not sound like anything, but what it does is you get a feeling for the fact that the character is actually a human, as opposed to some mindless plot robot that's been designed by a scriptwriter. That, you press a button and he goes left and he goes right, and then he shoots a bad guy and he reveals that he's really a bad guy and blah, blah, blah. So, For Your Eyes Only, I quite like it. It's not the best Bond movie. It's not bad, but there you are. So, 17, License to Kill, the best Bond and one of the worst Bond movies. This is basically an episode of Miami Vice that has been turned into a James Bond film, where James Bond leaves the Secret Service to get revenge for the either the death or the considerable maiming of his friend Felix Leiter, who is practically indestructible in all of the films. And License to Kill was originally meant to be called License Revoked, until somebody pointed out the Americans didn't know what the word revoked meant, and so therefore, even though Bond hasn't got a license to kill, in License to Kill, he kills, but he hasn't got a license to kill. Okay, well, there's a lot wrong with this movie. There's a fantastic Bond girl in it. There's actually some really great moments in this. There's also some pretty terrible moments. There's a fantastic subplot about the religious cults, and there's some really dark violence that goes much darker than I would expect James Bond to get. But otherwise, it is perfectly functional, perfectly serviceable. A 15 for James Bond, back to his gritty best, but not the best one, no. So we go to, I think it's 16 now. 16, Quantum of Solace, the thingy of what's it? A film hampered by the fact that it was made, edited, written just before the deadline came in for the Hollywood writers' strike, and it shows in the plot. The plot's quite interesting. The conceit behind it around harnessing energy by controlling water supplies is quite interesting, quite Bond bad guy. Kind of leans into some of the themes which are leaned upon in Diamonds Are Forever. But it's thoroughly average in every way. It's one of the shortest Bond movies. It's lacking amazing moments. So Quantum of Solace, not the best Bond movie at all. Probably, well, not the lowest one of the Daniel Craigs, but certainly quite a step down from Casino Royale. Number 17, I think. Here is Tomorrow Never Dies. I love Tomorrow Never Dies. It's got a really interesting idea around the newspaper mogul who starts to form news and starts to influence the news so that he can get the ratings that he needs and wants for his show. I think it's really interesting. Pierce Brosnan is clearly fully awake throughout the making of this movie, and they were also, I don't know why I've got an eyelash in there. Also, I think they were kind of like trying to kind of set up the other characters as potential spin-offs, which obviously they also tried with Halle Berry's character in Dog Shit Another Day. Again, not an amazing film, perfectly average. In fact, very cromulent, to quote the Simpsons, in many, many ways, but an utterly okay movie, although nothing more than just okay. So I've missed a couple of movies out. Reason being is that I don't have any physical print media yet. But the next one, and I think probably the 13th Bond movie, is No Time to Die, which came out last week. I think it comes out in America any second now, quite literally any second now. No Time to Die is a pretty good Bond movie. It's a heck of a lot better than Skyfall and Spectre. I had terrible fears about No Time to Die, is that when I watched it, I'd end up watching an absolutely terrible movie that pissed all over the James Bond mythology. And what No Time to Die does is it manages to both put a nice little bow and wrap up the Daniel Craig era, but also at the same point go back to, I think, some of the core parts of the Bond kind of formula, which is you do have a bad guy, you do have a really bizarre, fucked up plan to go and take over the world and change the way that society operates. You've got that megalomaniac, but you've got a bit of daddy issues in there. You've got a bit of family. You've got a bit of Vlad the Explainer. You've got a bit of people going, Bond. You've got, I don't know, children and a family and a dog and a cat and everything, and it's not amazing at all. But I think that's probably, it's in the top half of the Bond movies by a tiny sliver, but it's not by any means the best. But I think it's a fitting send off. If you think that it's the best Bond movie you've ever seen, watch more Bond movies, because you haven't seen Moonraker. Controversial. Number 12 on the list of my favourite Bond movies, the first Roger Moore movie. So much like Octopussy taking a huge cue from Raiders of the Lost Ark, Man with the Golden Gun taking a huge cue from the Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee movies, and Moonraker being heavily influenced by Star Wars, Live and Let Die decided it was going to shamelessly reclaim blaxploitation and turn it into Bondsploitation. So it's got a very unusual plot, which I'm not sure has aged particularly well, but it's got some wonderful set pieces in there. It's got quite an irreverent approach to who James Bond is. It's got a really strange bad guy, Baron von Semedy. It's just generally, it's kind of weird, and I really like it. It's darker than most James Bond films, and at the same point, it's utterly flippant and it's total candy floss. There's, for example, Jane Seymour as a tarot card reading person. James Bond there, only ever shot in black and white. And then here's a section where trespassers will be eaten on the crocodile farm, which is in the movie. And there's the seemingly immortal and unkillable bad guy, Baron von Samedi, I believe is called. His name is. It's a really good movie. It does, unfortunately, have the introduction of, I think, was it Sheriff W. Pepper, who is a cliche of America, complete with 10-gallon hat and 20-gallon waistline. But that's not the point. It's got a great boat chase in it, actually. Really good boat chase in it. But a boat chase alone does not a good movie make. Because if it did, well, frankly, I think Moonraker's got 2 boat chases in it, actually, which must make it the best James Bond film, which is pretty exciting, I guess. Number 1 will leave you shook. So, number 11 on the list of Bond movies, I absolutely love The Man with the Golden Gun. Aside from the fact that Scaramanga can manage to run the whole of his island with the guy from what is it, Love Island or whatever it's called, Love Boat, the little fella whose name I've forgotten. Apart from the fact that he can manage to run the whole of his secret desert island hideaway and power station with that one guy, there is very little to fault about The Man with the Golden Gun. I think it's fantastic. It's stupid, knowingly stupid. It's got the lowest kill count, by the way, of any James Bond film, because James Bond only kills one person in The Man with the Golden Gun. It's got an interesting idea around energy, and how controlling the world's energy is a really good kind of thing for a Bond bad guy to get into. It's got a flying plane. It's got a really unusual car chase. It's got, I mean, come on, Christopher Lee as the bad guy, an assassin who charges $1 million a shot. in a song that's sung by Lulu. You can't get cheesier than that unless you order the cheesiest cheeseburger from Cheeseland in Cheesetown. It's just lovely, brilliant, and stupid. There's Bond, and unsurprisingly, Maud Adams appearing again. One of the few people that get to appear as a Bond girl twice. This fantastic moment. Christopher Lee with a golden gun that can be assembled like Lego or some kind of transformer. Bond with his own gun in a shootout. Oh, and there's a classy bit of open shirt Roger Moore action. Roger Moore, named after your father, of course, much like Plenty O'Toole. And there is the golden gun itself. £1 million a shot from that gun. It looks awful. I'm not convinced it's worth £1 million. But the man with the golden gun is cheesy hokum that I think is absolutely brilliant. And by the way, I think we're all on a winning streak from here on with all the Bond movies. Just gold all the way. Number 10, You Only Live Twice. Yes, it's a parody of a James Bond film starring James Bond. Yes, it's the first James Bond film with a hollowed out volcano. It's the first one with rockets. It's the first one with a bad guy with a very obvious facial scar. I'd like to introduce you to Blofeld, or Donald Pleasance, or Dr. Loomis, depending on your point of view if you watch the Halloween movies. Donald Pleasance there doing his bit for the facial scarring of mankind. So anybody that's got bad acne will automatically be a James Bond bad guy in the future. It's got some dodgy attitudes because Bond goes to Japan and somehow they give him some plastic surgery so he can fake his way into passing as a Japanese man, which I think is a little bit dodgy. There's a scene with the autogyro, is what they're called Little Nell, which is a weird, bizarre flying plane thing. Effectively, I think they just go down to trade fairs and they just go, well, that one looks good. We'll have that, and we'll use that in the film. So it's almost like actually James Bond films are adverts for military manufacturers. Who knows? Number 9, From Russia with Love. I know some people love From Russia with Love. I think it's a very low-key Bond movie. The stakes are quite low. It's clearly actually influenced by Hitchcock. So it's got the scene with the helicopter chasing the man on the deserted kind of mountaintop, which is very clearly kind of borrowed from North by Northwest. It's got a good old-fashioned bit of love and sex. It's got a slightly unusual undertone, i.e. Rosa Klebb there is clearly kind of portrayed as being slightly gay and therefore slightly evil, which is not a good trait to have. I think From Russia with Love, by the way, also has probably the lowest stakes ending. It's got a fight on a train between Robert Shaw, who later became Quint in Jaws, and James Bond, and very little in the way of quips or anything like that at all. It's very serviceable, completely does the job as a Bond movie, but it's nothing amazing From Russia with Love. Sorry, that's the way I see it. So there you are. And then we have number 8. What's number 8 going to be? I'm sure you're on the edges of your seats waiting to find out that it is in fact The Living Daylights. Timothy Dalton, in my opinion, the best Bond, and his best film is partially a kind of for your eyes only style Cold War thriller, but it's also at the same point something a little bit dirtier, a little bit more obvious, a little bit less flippant, I think, than the Roger Moore era. I think Timothy Dalton was fantastic. I saw The Living Daylights in the cinema to I think 14 people at the Birmingham Odeon, which had 3,500 seats on a Wednesday afternoon. I thought it was great. I thought Timothy Dalton did a great job of being James Bond. I thought this scene was utterly gratuitous. There he is with one of the world's first mobile phones taken from the Museum of Mobile Phones. And there is Miriam Darbo as both a fantastic prize-winning cellist and a secret communist sniper, which of course is that great kind of second career plan which you're going to take, is to kill people that look like James Bond but aren't actually James Bond. Well, so be it. I think that's a pretty good way of living your life. So that's the Timothy Dalton era done. We've got a few more to come. I think that might be Yep. So we haven't got to the last of any one particular Bond yet. Number 7 for me is A View to a Kill. I think this is a fantastic movie. It's bizarre, it's weird. There's Christopher Walken there as Max Zorin. By the way, they did ask David Bowie if he wanted to appear as the bad guy. David Bowie declined. So if you get Christopher Walken, you're basically getting a kind of like a budget Bowie. And Max Zorin, by the way, is fantastic in this. He's chewing the scenery like a very hungry caterpillar, indeed. And his bad guy, it's clearly kind of intimated, is the result of genetic experiments by demented former German concentration camp scientists that have thrived behind Soviet lines to create a genetic army race of super warriors. Yes, I did say that. But it's also got Grace Jones as a bizarre and utterly undefeatable woman called Mayday, who, like all true bad guys, defects in the end and shows that she's really got a heart of gold. Ah, bless. That's what you want. So, I think this is the last of the Connerys. You'll be surprised to hear Goldfinger, which often gets rated as number 1, is only number 6 on my list of Bond movies. Goldfinger is the very film that made the very template that was going to be Bond forever and ever and ever. It's got everything. It is utterly formulaic tut of the highest order that is, of course, absolute genius. It's a brilliant film. It's terrible and it's brilliant. The idea that you would detonate a nuclear bomb inside Fort Knox to irradiate the gold and make the value of the own gold, which you have and own yourself, to make it more expensive and desirable and needable and wantable and all those things. And it's got all the templates that you've got. It's got the crazy car chase. It's got the bizarre villain with a slightly quirky kind of ideas. It's got an unusual death where a woman gets painted in gold until she dies. It's got Bond flirting with Moneypenny. It's got Bond playing golf because that's a rich man's thing. There's Bond in a car in Switzerland. There's Auric Goldfinger himself, played by, I think, by Gert Frobe, who has the most fantastic line, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." It's got that, which has a woman who is immune to Bond's irresistible charms. We've got Oddjob there as the bizarre, steel-tipped, hat-throwing judo kung fu expert type character, because who needs a bad guy when you can have a good guy? And we've got this here. We've got the Aston Martin making its first appearance in the franchise. Of course, even in No Time to Die, an Aston Martin or a similar type of vehicle painted silver appears with machine guns hidden behind the headlights. I don't know how they make that work. Goldfinger is the quintessential James Bond movie, the 100% template from which they made everything else ever afterwards. It's really, really good. It's daft, it's fun, it's stupid in a very smart way, or smart in a very stupid way, depending on your point of view. It's absolutely great. I love it to bits. But it's daft and mad as a box of frogs, and that's the 6th Bond movie. Number 5, Casino Royale, the first Daniel Craig movie, and the best, which is my way of saying there hasn't been a classic Bond movie made since 2006. Everything we've got here, utter classics, by the way. It skillfully deconstructs the perceptions that you have around what a Bond movie is. Obviously, it's still James Bond at the end of the day. You've still got a bad guy, Mads Mikkelsen, who I know at least one of you on Twitter really, really likes, who has a weeping eye, because all bad guys have to have some form of physical affliction. Of course, because why not, guys? That's how it works. And so, therefore, you've got Casino Royale, which is a classic. Nobody's going to defend it any other way and say that it's terrible, unless you really, really like Roger Moore movies. And talking of Roger Moore movies, number 4, The Spy Who Loved Me. Parts of this film had lighting assistance from Stanley Kubrick, by the way, who came onto set outside of working hours and advised the film's cinematographer about how best to light the scenes, because he'd got so good at making films in candlelight with Barry Lyndon, he became practically an expert on it. The Spy Who Loved Me is I think the most typical of the Bond movies with Roger Moore. It's got the plot about the madman who wants to take over the world and use crazy technology to make mankind extinct, to create his own new super race. It's got bizarre travelogue sequences. It goes to Egypt. It goes to the sea. It goes to Greece, probably. I don't know. It goes everywhere. And of course, Roger Moore there is just, well, I'm being very lovely. It's also got Jaws. Do I know him? Not socially. He kills people. Again, a bad guy with a bizarre and unusual physical affliction, tying in with your standard cliched approach that all James Bond bad guys have got to have something wrong with them. This guy, he has teeth made out of steel, much like a Bene Gesserit in David Lynch's Dune. And then finally, we've got this car that isn't a car, that's actually a boat, that's a submarine, that's a Lotus Esprit, that's a small toy. Spy Who Loved Me is fantastic. It's also got a scene where one of the submarine's chefs definitely uses his chef's hat in a way that indicates that that guy is not mucking about. He definitely means business, which is a nice way of saying don't mess with the chef on your nuclear submarines. So we've got 3 films. What are they going to be? Well, the astute of you will have already noticed there are 3 pretty obvious errors. But as I've said before, number 1 will leave you stunned. Number 3, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the only film with George Lazenby as James Bond. And I think George Lazenby did his best. He acquitted himself as best as I think you could reasonably expect anybody to do, considering it was his first major film. He'd been in some adverts beforehand. But it does feature some absolutely terrible lines, including that classic one about "this never happened to the other fella." It's okay. It's got some fantastic moments. Telly Savalas chewing the scenery as Blofeld there. But they never kind of dwell too much upon On Her Majesty's Secret Service as being a really great James Bond film. Hugely influenceable. Huge influence on people like Christopher Nolan, for example. I think it's Piers Gloria, the section which is set in the snow base, for example. Huge influence on Inception. Effectively, Inception is Christopher Nolan's Bond movie, and this one is really, really good. It's a shame that George Lazenby isn't that great at being a Bond. Looks the part, can't act the part, which is important. But it does have the most fantastic line about, "Do you remember when you came here and you hated chickens? I have taught you to love chickens." Good God. Somebody somewhere sat down and went, "That's the Bond movie for me. It's got your chickens in it." I'm like, okay, thanks, guys. Right, there's only 2. By process of logical deduction, if I reveal number 2, you're also going to know what number 1 is. But I'm going to go for number 2 first, because I think I should. Goldeneye, the film that changed 1,000 people's lives with just the video game alone. The best Bond movie in a very long time, although it now has been made in the first half of my life, because Goldeneye, somewhat staggeringly, is 25 years old. I remember seeing it at the cinema in Birmingham with my girlfriend in 1996 and being like, my God, James Bond movies can be good again. Not saying that License to Kill wasn't, but it could have been better. There's a reason why License to Kill is number 15 on my list of movies and Goldeneye is number 2. Pierce Brosnan was absolutely brilliant in this. Now, there was a number of films that Pierce Brosnan made just before this came out. I think one was called Death Train, where very clearly you can see him going, I'm auditioning to be James Bond in this movie, and they've hired me because they knew I was in the running to be James Bond for this movie. But since James Bond was made in 1987 with Timothy Dalton, because Pierce Brosnan couldn't get out of his contract as a TV detective called Remington Steele, he did a couple of movies outside of that where clearly it was all but James Bond in name. Pierce Brosnan was excellent. Judi Dench was fantastic as well in the film. And it just, I don't know, there's just something about Goldeneye that's light and airy and fun, and it's got an air of both. It knows it's stupid and it knows it's daft, and it plays it with a straight face, and it does a great job of doing so. And of course, it features a fantastic line, "I am invincible." My favourite Bond movie. Some of you won't believe me, but genuinely, I love this film. I think it is phenomenal. It is my favourite Bond movie. I remember recording it off ITV, and I saw it 11 times in one summer alone. It is the unmatchable classic, Moonraker. I think this is a fantastic James Bond film. It's like somebody made a parody of a James Bond film that was 14% weirder than your average James Bond film. So it was still recognisable as James Bond, but also at the same point, you looked at it and went, there's something wrong with this movie. It's Bond, but it's not quite Bond. It's a little bit strange. This is just brilliant. It doesn't put a foot wrong at any point all the way through. The plot is phenomenal. It's about one of the very best Bond bad guys, Drax. And by the way, Drax is the best Bond bad guy. Because out of all the Bond bad guys, if you were going to watch a kind of like a documentary about a crazed megalomaniac, trust me, a day in the life of Drax would be a heck of a lot more fun than the day in the life of, I think, is it Toby Carver, or the bad guy from let's think, Quantum of Solace. I'm going to call him Joe Boring, although I know that's not his name. So Moonraker, absolutely brilliant. It's got everything. It was shot on location in space. That may have been a lie. It was shot in Venice, California. Bond goes to space. There's space rockets, space shuttles, improbable explosions, Buenos Aires. The most egregious and obvious product placement that I've ever seen in any film whatsoever. And trust me, I still think about smoking a Marlboro or flying on British Airways every time I think about this movie, because that's pretty much what it is. It's just an advert for like airlines, fags, and kind of certain soft drinks. And it's got this wonderful line in acerbic, cutting retorts from Drax that just make you go, that dude would be a fucking hoot to go out with. He'd probably kill you at the end of it, but it'd be enormous fun. Moonraker. We've got Q there at his best, including that a fantastic scene where they show some Mexican kind of things. We've got Drax, the best Bond bad guy of all time. We've got Roger Moore and Lois Maxwell there. I think her name's Holly Goodnight, I believe it is. And we've got a fantastic space battle. Look, I'm not going to take any criticism from anybody about this. Moonraker is brilliant. It is everything I want in a James Bond film. It's daft, it's silly, it's smart, it's serious at times. It's ridiculous, but just in the right way. It knows it's ridiculous and it leans into it. It is just incredible good fun. And yeah, when I grow up, I want to be Drax. I'm already working on the beard. The rest will naturally follow. So that is my Bond rundown. So we're going to start with right at the bottom of the pack, Spectre, then Skyfall, then Die Another Day, Octopussy, Diamonds Are Forever, Never Say Never Again, Thunderball, almost said Doctor Who there. The World Is Not Enough. I think no, Tomorrow Never Dies. Then I think it's For Your Eyes Only, License to Kill, Quantum of Solace, No Time to Die, Tomorrow Never Dies, then Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun, You Only Live Twice, From Russia with Love, The Living Daylights, A View to a Kill, Goldfinger, Casino Royale, The Spy Who Loved Me, Goldeneye, and of course Moonraker at number one, the best James Bond film. I'm sure the internet was not waiting for my list about what the best James Bond films are and how they're going to be ranked, but I thought about it and I thought, no, I want to talk about James Bond now that I've seen No Time to Die, which is surprisingly not terrible compared to some of the other James Bond films, and there you have it. So, thank you for that. Listening to me wobble on for 45 minutes about James Bond movies. Laughter and funny material will be dubbed in later, but also I will, the next time I'm doing one, I've got a couple of things lined up, which I'm going to be talking about in upcoming days. I also, I'm going to say, I've been really tired recently. I went out 2 nights in a row, which is something I've not done for a very long time. And I went to 2 gigs in 2 nights, which again is something I've not done since 2019. So I've been fairly tired in that respect because it's all new to me. But yeah, there you are. As I said, I only ever do these when I feel like it and when I think about whatever it is on my mind. I'm going to wrap up now with that the picture of all the postcards that I've just shown you in the James Bond postcard set. That postcard set came out for the 50th anniversary of James Bond in 2012. The retail price was £14.99. In the works, it was considerably cheaper. It was about £5. I think I've just had £5 worth of value out of that. Thank you. Stay beautiful. I know some of you will disagree with the ranking. It's only my opinion. It's not that big a deal at all, is it really? Not in the big scheme of things. You are free to watch whatever films in whatever order you like, as long as it makes you happy. That's the thing in the world that we should be aiming for, is to be happy and to enjoy our time on the planet as we roll through this ball of rock floating through space. Anyway, I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to have an appointment with that cup of tea which I showed you earlier, shaken not stirred, and I will see you all again hopefully sometime soon. Bye.